Hello, everyone. We're just admitting people to the room. Welcome to the webinar. Just going to give everybody a few seconds and then we get started. And please bear in mind that we will be recording the webinar.
We already have 122 people on board and counting. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, I think I can go ahead and get started as you admit participants. So hello, everyone. My name is Isadora Moraes. I would like to welcome you all to our webinar titled, How Can We Use AI Tools to Assess, or How Can We Use AI to Assess Our Students? This webinar is organized by a partnership between the BRAZ-TESOL Assessment SIG, the BRAZ-TESOL EdTech SIG, the British Council English and Exams Area, and the British Council Assessment Research Group. So in that regard, I would like to thank a few people. Dr. Mariano Felici from the British Council Assessment Research Group, and Roberta Mesquita from the EdTech SIG, who kindly accepted our invitation to be our guest speakers. So thank you so much. Tatiana Silva, who is representing the British Council English and Exams Area. And last but not least, my colleagues in the Assessment SIG and the EdTech SIG from BRAZ-TESOL. So thank you everybody for the teamwork that has made this webinar possible. I would also like to thank you guys, all of those of you who registered and are currently attending our webinar. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat as we will address them later in the Q&A. Okay? Tatiana, on to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We are very excited about this webinar today. My name is Tatiana Balbino. I am Business Development Manager for Exams at the British Council, and I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Mariano Felici, Senior Researcher, Data Scientist for Language Assessment and Learning. I just forgot to confirm if you're all hearing me well, but I guess you do because nobody complains, so let's move on.
Yes.
Mariana, thanks. Mariana's work involves looking at how artificial intelligence and natural language processing can be used to improve computer-assisted learning and testing, from curating data sets and building models supporting colleagues in the adoption of new technology. Mariano is also a visiting researcher at the University of Cambridge, where he was a research associate as part of the Alta Institute before joining the Assessment Research Group at the British Council. He has a PhD in computer science from the University of Cambridge and has worked extensively on natural language processing for language learning and assessment, including grammatical error correction, automatic error typing, system evaluation, automated closed test generation, and item calibration. Mariano has published many scientific papers in top-tier NLP conferences, given talks and tutorials in different venues around the world, and is a regular reviewer for workshops, journals, and conferences in his fields. So, Dr. Mariano, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction and for inviting me to be part of this event again. I'm really excited to join you all for this great webinar. So let me share my slides and start with my presentation. Can you all see this?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So my idea for today is to talk about how we can use AI to assess young learners. So more specifically, how we can use AI to build a test, to build a standard test that can help to assess their proficiency in English. So I would like to begin by looking at why we might want to do this. So this all started with an idea many years ago by the new product development team at the British Council. So they realized that there was a need for a new kind of modern online assessments for young learners that would be a bit different from the traditional pen and paper kind of tests that we are used to. And as part of their extensive market research, they identified some of the key features that they thought these new kind of exams should have. So I'm listing some of these features here. So one of the needs that they identified is that these new tests should be aligned to the CFR. Also, they should integrate skills rather than assess the skills in isolation, as we often see in exams. Also, ideally, this test would be adaptive in the sense that the machine would show the test takers items of increasing difficulty in order to try to assess the level much more quickly and therefore make the test shorter. Also, this test should be course agnostic, so it doesn't matter what curriculum you're following in your schools, you could all take the test. Also, the test should be fair and reliable, which means that we should try to remove all the biases that we often have when we have human raters involved, and also make sure that whatever the scores we get from an AI model, they are reliable and accurate. And finally, because this is intended to be used by students in primary education and moving to secondary education, it should be fun and engaging in a way that they wouldn't necessarily know that they're being assessed. Now, why would we want to use AI for this? What is it that AI can bring to the table? So I listed some of the main benefits of using AI for this kind of assessments. I won't have the time to go through all of them, but I'm sure you are familiar with many of these aspects, questions relating to interactivity, how by using things such as speech recognition and speech synthesis, we can generate interactive dialogues, how we can personalize and adapt content to specific user needs, how we can use generative AI, for example, to increase multimodality, so we can have different types of input such as text, video, images, and so on. How we can improve fairness by removing biases, as I mentioned earlier. Obviously, the question of automation, making a test available 24/7 and not having the need for a human teacher examiner to be available the whole time. And in some cases, also questions around security, if we're thinking of, for example, using things such as remote invigilation or video-assisted invigilation. So these are all aspects and benefits of using AI for this purpose. So let's have a look now at how we can integrate some of these aspects, maybe not all of them, into a particular test, into the British Council's primary English test. This is one of our most recent products. So I'm happy to talk to you about how we designed this whole new test for young learners. So the process that we followed to create this new product started with an idea. And this is the idea that I mentioned that the new product development team had a few years ago. So their vision was to create what they call the first online stage adaptive test that uses AI and is aimed at young learners. And by young learners, I mean people between 9 and 12 years old, with proficiency levels ranging between pre-A1 to B1. So from this initial idea, the next step was to actually design the test. And for this purpose, we recruited our own internal and also some external experts in test design, experts in assessment for young learners. So all together came up with the format of the exam, the kind of skills that would be tested, the descriptors for these skills, the rubrics, the rating scales, and also how we would make this test interactive by the use of AI. Because this test is aimed at young learners, we wanted to make this gamified. So we wanted to make it very, very engaging and fun. So this was a very important concept that we had in mind. Now, in terms of the tasks and how we would score these tasks using a computer, there was a clear division between receptive skills, so as you know, reading and listening, and productive skills. And we decided that the best way of doing this was to, as we said, we objectively score receptive skills. That means we don't really need anything too sophisticated to rate those. It could be just a matter of comparing the answers to gold standard answers. It's just a ticking exercise. Whereas for productive skills, that is where we wanted to use AI. Then once the format of the test was decided and the tasks were designed, they were trialed in a number of countries around the world. This was, I think, the biggest trial that we ever had at the British Council for a test. This included over 2,000 test takers around the world in 23 countries in 6 continents. So it was a very big undertaking. So the result of this trial exercise was a collection of all the performances by all the students around the world, which were then scored by human examiners that were specifically trained to score the exam. So there were 2 main purposes for doing this trial. One of them was to perform psychometric validation of the tasks in the exam. But the other, that was no less important, was collecting data to build the scoring models that we would need further down the line. So once we collected all this data, so we collected all the performances, both the audio and the written responses and their scores, we use all that data to build the AI models that were then integrated into the exam. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. So after the models were built and we made sure that they worked okay, we perform further piloting to make sure that this test and the models also worked well in countries whose L1s we didn't have in our training data, because obviously we couldn't include every country in the world. So that was also a test to see how well the exam would perform in unseen scenarios. So finally, once we did that piloting step and we tweaked the models, we were ready to launch the test and use the AI models. So now I would like to show you a little more how we build an AI model for this purpose. So if any of you have already been in previous webinars, you might be familiar with this pipeline. So this is a pipeline for building AI models. So every time we build an AI model, especially if we are using what we call supervised machine learning, so a way of making a machine learn from examples and labels, we start from data. So we have to perform a data collection process, as I described before. So once we get all the data with their corresponding scores, we split this collection into 3 sets: a training set, a validation set or development set, and a test set, which are the collections of data that we're going to use down the line. The next step in this training of models is what we call pre-processing. So the problem that we have after we've collected all this information is that machines don't really understand text or images or audio or video. They only understand numbers. So we have to transform all this initial data that we've collected into numerical representations that the machine can understand and we can use to train these models. And there are different ways in which we can do this transformation. But the way that we prefer in educational context is what we call feature-based. This means defining and identifying key bits of information in the input that we think as experts are important in order to derive a score in this case, or the label that we want to assign. So in the case of written responses, for example, we might look at things like the grammar, the words that were being used, the length of the response. So anything that we think is important, we will define it and extract it. So after doing that extraction process, we get a numerical representation that can be now used to train the machine. And that is the next step. So we take those representations, we feed all of that data in this numerical format into a machine learning algorithm, and we will get what we call a model. So a representation, something that knows how to assign new scores to unseen data. So what happens in general is that once we build that model, that first initial model is not the best model that we can get from our data. So we often perform another process that we call fine-tuning or optimization, where we use some of the data that we reserve from our initial collection. If you remember, I mentioned that we set aside a validation or development set. So what we do is, once we've trained the model, we use that validation set to see how well this initial model performs on that data. And based on the performance that we get, we redo training once again using the initial training data. And we repeat this process until we can't make any further improvements to our model. And that's when we stop. And then we use the third data collection that we define, the test set, to compute a final measure of performance. And this is very important to do it this way, because it would be unfair to test the model on things that it has already seen. That's why we keep separate unseen data at different stages of modeling. So once we get this model and it's ready and it's optimized, we are now in a position to use this in real life, in real scenarios. And in our case, this means embedding this into the test platform. So
Dr. Mariano, just let me step in, please, just to say we have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. So so how do we use these models for the primary English test in particular? Well, we build models for two skills, as I mentioned. So we build models for writing and speaking. These models are built using a representative sample from students around the world with different L1s, and also a fairly even distribution of scores, because we have to make sure that the models are good at scoring all levels of proficiency. So this is very important to avoid biases. So these performances that we use for training, they are generally double or even triple rated by human markers. We also make sure that we use explainable models. And by this, I mean building models where we can explain how we derive the scores in every case. So that's why defining features and using feature-based models is very important. If we use things like these deep learning models that are very common nowadays, they perform very well, but they are essentially black boxes. So we're not in control, and we can't really trace back the scores to the values of features that could explain those scores. So that's why it's very important to build explainable models for educational purposes. And finally, we make sure that we use exactly the same scoring criteria as humans, and that we maximize the agreement of the models with the scores that were assigned by the human markers. So what do these writing and speaking models look like? Well, in the case of writing, we use a model that is prompt agnostic and is used across the 4 different kinds of tasks that we have in the test. And we look at 2 rating criteria. So one of them is language use, and another one is task completion. So every writing task is rated on these two criteria. Inside these criteria, you will have all the features that I mentioned earlier. So it's up to us as specialists in the field to make sure that we define features that accurately assess and reflect the objective of each of these criteria. Then for the speaking model, we also have a prompt agnostic speaking model that is used across 5 different tasks. Again, this is also a feature-based model, but in this case, because we have different types of tasks, we have a wider range of criteria that we use for assessment. And we don't use all of them for every single task. Sometimes some of the tasks use some combination of these criteria, others use another subset, and so on. Now, what's important for these speaking models is that because we're dealing with children, we need to use specialized automatic speech recognition systems. So the usual ASR systems that we find on the internet or that are easily accessible, most of them are trained on speech from adult speakers. So this would not give us accurate results in our models. So for that reason, we have to build specialized ASR models for children. That's what we use in our exam. And the purpose of this ASR model is twofold. So on the one hand, we use this to get a transcription of the audio, but on the other hand, we also get some very important features from the audio itself that we can use to assess things such as pronunciation or fluency. Now, after we've built these models and we've got the test ready and people start using it, we have to be aware that there could be some potential issues. So I'm showing here some of them, some of these potential issues and how we can solve them. So the first one refers to cheating. So the fact that test takers might want to get some unfair advantage by, for example, getting help from somebody else or using other resources as they are taking the exam, or just basically doing things that are not allowed during the test. So for that reason, the way that we implement a test is by delegating the administration of the exam to each of the schools that want to use the exam. So that means that invigilation is on site by humans. So there is a human invigilator that takes care of this process. Also related to cheating, some students might be tempted to try and game the scoring models. So they might want to think about what kind of features or how it is that the AI model that's under the hood is assigning the scores. And they might attempt to do things like, I don't know, repeating words or copying texts from the internet, memorizing things, writing things in their native language and so on. So in order to prevent these things, we have a system to detect and flag potential issues. And when we detect these things, we send them to a human examiner for rating. Then there could also be issues around poor speech recognition. So these models are not perfect, they're not foolproof. So in order to maximize the accuracy of recognition, we use, as I mentioned, specialized models, but we also try to make sure that test takers use high quality headsets. And we also get a confidence measure for this recognition from these recognition models. So internally, we can check if the model is not very confident in its transcription, then we can route these again to a human marker to rate this performance. And finally, there could be some concerns about inaccurate scoring. So in that regard, we make sure that if the models are not confident, we have the performances marked by humans, and that we also perform periodic model reviews and updates to make sure that the models also always behave and perform very well when using these models in different countries. So to end my very brief talk, so I'd like to raise awareness of some ethical considerations that we have to take into account. So because we're dealing with children, we have to get consent from their parents for them to take the test, for us to collect the data and process it. This also is related to compliance with the law. So we have to make sure that we comply with both international and national legislation. It doesn't really matter where you build these models, but more about where you're using them. So you have to make sure that you comply by local legislation. And then I'd like to mention three very important aspects related to ethics and things that we hear a lot nowadays. So things related to the mitigation of bias. So by making sure that we use representative data sets during training and we optimize the models and we run pilots, we're able to minimize the risk of introducing biases in our models. Then in terms of transparency, as I mentioned earlier, we try to use models that are very explainable. We also provide documentation to students, parents, and teachers that explain how we use AI models in the test. And finally, in terms of reliability, as I mentioned earlier, in order to make sure that the models always perform accurately, we perform periodic reviews and model updates based on the data that we collect during the life cycle of the exam. So I hope this has given you a nice overview of what is involved in building models for standardized tests for young learners. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felici, for this very interesting presentation. I will now introduce our second guest speaker. So just to remind everyone, we're going to have some time for Q&A after the second presentation. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat. So our second speaker for today is Hobbs Mesquita. She's an educational consultant specialized in bilingual education and language teaching through educational technologies. With over 25 years of experience in the field, Hobbs has worked extensively in developing and implementing bilingual programs, focusing on integrating language learning with EdTech tools. Hobbs is dedicated to demystifying the use of educational technology in the classroom and advocating for inclusive practices that empower learners of all backgrounds. So without further ado, please welcome Roberta Mesquita. Roberta, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Isadora, for this warm welcoming. I would like to share my screen.
Dr. Mariano, oh, thank you.
Yeah. Let me know when you can see it. Can you see
Yep,
it?
the floor is yours.
All right. So, well, as Isadora mentioned, I am a teacher, and I try to demystify the use of technology. You know, some people always say, "Oh, I don't understand. I can't do it." It's really not that hard. So I try to bring that into grounds that everyone can participate. So I'm not a doctor. My presentation is not going to be as technical as Dr. Felici's, which was very enlightening. This is more of a hands-on approach. So what I would like to do is dive a little bit into how AI-powered tools can streamline grading processes, offer immediate feedback, and provide valuable insights to make language teaching more efficient and effective. My goal today is to focus on how teachers can use AI to ease their workload, not by introducing complicated platforms, but by showing you practical steps that are accessible to everyone. As teachers, we know that grading language assessments, particularly essays and oral responses, is time-consuming and often subjective. We can spend hours grading manually, and inconsistency in evaluation may rise due to fatigue or any bias that we may face. Additionally, delayed feedback means students don't get immediate insight. This hinders their learning process. This is where AI comes in. AI offers tools to automate grading tasks like multiple choice or short answer questions, and it significantly reduces the time teachers spend on this repetitive work. More importantly, it provides consistency in grading and gives student immediate feedback. This creates a more effective learning loop where students can act on their feedback while the lesson is still fresh in their head. In sum, grading is very time consuming, and language assessment especially takes a long time to do, especially essays and spoken language. They're very labor intensive. We do face the challenge of subjectivity and inconsistency and delayed feedback. You know, how many times have we had students ask for their essays back or um, their scores for any oral assessment, and it takes us a little while. We will probably not have that available the next class, so it's frustrating both ways. So in efficiency, what AI can do is it automates repetitive tasks such as grading multiple choice or a short answer, and it reduces the workload significantly. In consistency, it ensures objective and consistent evaluation across students, minimizing subjectivity. And that obviously in feedback, students receive their instant feedback, allowing them to correct mistakes right on spot and learn more efficiently in real time. For teachers, it saves significant time by automating grading and allowing us to focus on more meaningful interactions with students. Instead of spending hours manually correcting assignments, we can use it to handle these tasks and free up time for lesson planning and creative teaching strategies. Moreover, many AI tools come with data analytics features so we can track students' progress in real time and identify areas where they're excelling or struggling, which allow us to tailor our teaching methods more effectively and provide targeted support. This is what we've been talking about for the past couple of years, right? Individual teaching, individualized learning, so we can have our workload diminished to be able to actually focus on that. But how, I'm not going to get into very specifics, but I think there's just a tad bit that we need to understand how it works. So AI uses natural language processing, normally referred to as NLP, and it helps machines understand, interpret, and generate human language. In grading, NLP can be used to evaluate students' written or spoken responses by analyzing grammar, syntax, vocabulary, and fluency. It automatically assesses essays, reports oral responses, checking for linguistic accuracy, coherence, and language use. These tools can provide instant feedback on grammar mistakes, stylistic issues, and even the complexity of vocabulary used. For example, we can use NLP to evaluate written content for grammatical accuracy, style, tone, and clarity. And then since it's offering suggestions right there on spot, the students can even use it to refine their writing before they submit it. Or we can just turn it off and have them submit however it is and turn it on for ourselves so we can see where they need improvement. Also, in pattern recognition, AI uses this to detect recurring errors in students' responses and identify common mistakes such as incorrect verb conjugations or sentence structure issues, and then provide feedback significantly tailored to each student's learning gaps. By analyzing the students' responses, we can identify trends in their errors, like frequent misuse tenses of or word order issues, and offer personalized feedback aimed at addressing these recurrent issues. So this allows students to focus on their individual learning needs. For this, we have any BERT model which can process and understand the context of word in sentences will help these responses to language-related tasks such as essays or comprehension questions and ensure that the grading is consistent and contextually accurate. And obviously, as I mentioned before, and I will mention 100 times over, instant feedback. In feedback in general is very important, and feedback right there on spot is amazing because we can highlight the errors in writing or pronunciation or sentence structure, allowing students to see what went wrong and make corrections immediately. Also, we can have tailored suggestions that go even beyond marking answers right or wrong and offer personalized suggestions for improvement, such as sentence rewrites or alternative vocabulary. And the benefits for the students. We have several advantages. So immediate personalized feedback that keeps students engaged and motivated. They can practice at their own pace. We promote autonomy. We promote self-reflection, and we tackle challenges without feeling overwhelmed. Also, we foster accessibility, and students with diverse needs, including language learners or any other disability, we can have that tailored for them. So AI-powered tools provide personalized adaptive support that helps them learn more effectively. Now for the real world examples. I'm not going to advertise any platforms here, so if any of my slides do give away any names, I apologize in advance. But these are tools that are simply available on internet research, and all of them offer some type of free service. So this first one here is a platform that advertises grammar correction. If you install it, it will correct your tasks. But if you go into their website, they have a tab where you can upload a text and it will correct it for you. So I wrote a simple text and made sure I made many mistakes. So, and here is my feedback. I thought it was very interesting because it even gave me a grade. So as I said, I made many mistakes on purpose. So, and here you can tailor your goals. You can put the learning paths that you would like to pursue. So here it is. You know, every teacher correcting nightmare in essays done instantly with feedback, comments, and a grade, and with enough material that we can actually build up reports for analyzing the students, how they are evaluate how they are going through the process during the whole year. We don't have just one screenshot. We can actually have the whole process recorded. So here is the screenshot of my performance. It will give you a grade and why. My grade was a 59. It gives you a word count, even readability levels. So it analyzes all that, and you can download it and save it in a student's file, or even give it to the students or send it to the parents. So everyone can participate in this process. Here is another type of platform that allows students to create their own activities and assign them to students. So here we will get everything back, corrected, and scored with individualized feedback. Here you can set the parameters that you want to use. You can set learning goals, determine objectives and paths that they have to go through. I determined that my students should be evaluated through a debate. And then I chose the language level. You can use either curriculum standards or even has the CEFR here. So I chose a B1 for this a particular activity that I was going to do just to show you today. And then I set the objectives. I could either choose to have my students engage from one side of in pro or con of the debate, and I chose that they would argue for. I said cheating in exams, but I chose that the students would argue for cheating in exams. And they would have to, and the platform is actually feeding you all these responses. So you have to argue with the platform, and then in the end, it will give you a report. If I wanted, I could even feed it some extra information on the subject. For example, I could feed it the class material I've used for this assignment, or we can choose if the students are going to do this in writing or speaking. So the platform starts asking some questions, and then you're supposed to actually have an argumentative conversation with it. But I gave just one simple answer, and I submitted it, and I finished just to see how it would evaluate me. So this was my feedback, very detailed, definitely something all teachers could benefit from. And this would benefit all the students as well, and the process of constructing this the fluency with them. So this would normally take teachers hours, and it was done in probably 3 minutes. And it is also very impartial and assesses every student fairly. As it was mentioned in my bio, I'm a bilingual education specialist, so I do like a lot of formative assessment, and I use a lot of rubrics in my daily classes. But my biggest issue is on how to create rubrics. It's actually very a complex activity, and this other platform here, it creates rubrics for you. And you can also define every aspect it will assess, and it will go ahead and create the rubric for a project. Or what I like to do with little ones is to give them the rubrics, and they would have the peer assessment. Or you can go ahead and feed the platform the students' works, and it will assess everything for you and will give you all the reports, everything already very well detailed and generated.
Roberta?
So, yes, 10 minutes.
Excuse me. Yeah, actually, it's 5 minutes because I
5
forgot
minutes.
to. Yeah, I forgot to
No
let
problem.
you know. the 2 minutes.
I have 3 more slides.
I'm sorry for that.
No problem. So this is another example of the same platform. Here where you can feed the assignments, and will give you everything corrected and perfect for you to just keep score and save you a lot of time. Well, I have a son. Some people here know that he's also an English teacher. And one day he was very frustrated. It was a Sunday night, and he was very frustrated with correcting. He had a bunch of tests to correct, and he was very frustrated. And he said, "Mom, I really want a job that I don't have homework." And it is impossible for us teachers not to have homework, right? But we can definitely cut down our workload significantly. I know that there's much controversy around the use of AI, if it's friend or foe, and it's, there's many arguments, pro and cons. But in this case, for teacher planning, for correction, for cutting down our workload, our homework is definitely our best friend. And if you are not using it yet, you are wasting time. This was very short, very quick. We were just discussing one aspect of how teachers can use AI. But here's my contact if you want to discuss this any further, or even find out more about how I've been training. I do a lot of teacher training as well. So how teachers can use AI as a facilitator. I've been working with some teachers and we have a quick seminar to get you started. So drop me a line and I'll be glad to discuss this even further. And thank you very much for the British Council, the EdTech SIG, and the Assessment SIG for having me here. Hope you all enjoyed it a little bit. I have lots of fun using AI in my everyday life, and I hope that I have sparkled this with you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roberto, for this very insightful presentation. So guys, we will now have a very short time for questions. I see that some of you are raising your hands, but unfortunately, the questions can only be addressed in the chat, right? So we'll try to see how best we can use our time. There was a previous question for Dr. Felici about how the research is reported, right? And I think you already answered that question in the chat, Dr. Felici, but would you be able to let us know if at some point this is going to be published in a paper, or if that's not generally how it goes with the research that you conduct? If you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so we usually do talks about the test where we explain a few more details. Given the time constraints, I couldn't go into much more, unfortunately. But yeah, I would say keep tuned for further talks from the British Council advertising the test, not just as a product, but if you're interested in learning how it was developed and learn a few more technical details. We do have some technical reports, but as I mentioned in my reply, because of issues related to test security, we have to be very careful about the information that we give out, because this, as I mentioned during my talk, some of these things could be used against the purpose of the test, right? So people could try to game the test if they know how it works and so on. But we do provide handbooks to teachers and schools and parents and the test takers. And definitely, if anybody needs to know more technical details, they can get in touch with us and we'll be happy to help.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to ask Roberta something. So bear with me because this is a bit of a long question. So somebody said, my issue is, wouldn't this be transferring to AI what is precisely what makes us teachers essential? Wouldn't transferring grading and assessing to AI make it easier for companies to hire unspecialized staff to do what is now our jobs? Shouldn't we be arguing for more time for teachers to grade assignments? And then parentheses, not that AI can't be used to assist teachers in assessing and planning assessment. So I know it's a bit of a complex question.
Okay, so
do you want to comment? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, sure. So in arguing about hiring people to do this instead of AI, the thing is the feedback comes first to the teacher, so you can actually go back and tailor it if you need or if you don't agree, because we are the ones who are in the class every day and we are the ones who know our students. So this is just the automation of tasks that we would like correct verb tenses or vocabulary or misspelled words. This doesn't make us teachers, or this could be done by anyone. Yes, you're correct. But then when it comes to the feedback, we have to be the ones involved to know if that is actually pertinent. We know that AI is a machine, it's not human and it's not there. It doesn't know your students. It doesn't know if I know some moms would laugh, and when I was greeting my students, I would say, you didn't sleep well last night. And if that was a testing day, for example, we would have to have a more careful eye for that one student. There's a bunch of issues that we have to be involved. So yes, the machine cuts time on automated tasks that we would do without thinking, without taking all this in consideration. But we are the ones who are going to give this back to the students. So we are the ones. Someone even said in the chat, like, how can I give feedback without hurting my kids? So this is up to us. This is what makes us teachers. You know, we have to be the bridge between that. We're talking here about things that are, you know, that we would do. Just sometimes I'd like to like correct the tests without looking at the students. So I would be doing what an AI does. You know, I don't know who that student is. I'm just doing something automatically. So this is what I'm cutting down. I'm cutting down the time that I would sit down with a bunch of tests and correct them myself. So we can have that, and then you take that together with the feedback, analyze your student, you know, the profile, the portfolio. That's still up to us, and and that's the advantage, because we would have more time for that, to humanize that, to make, and then to tailor the next outcomes regarding what is really necessary for that group, or what is really necessary for that one student or not. If we can invest our time in creating better practices, instead of just, you know, getting overwhelmed and exhausted by correcting things that could be done by AI. Does that answer the question, or did I ramble on about many things?
I think it helps think about it. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also a point that I think Dr. Felici made in his presentation, what you were saying about, you know, feelings. So there were many ethical considerations in what you were developing, because you were dealing with young learners, right? Is there anything that you can tell us about, you know, if there was any specific reaction from the test trials, or everything went well, or I don't know, I'm trying to make like a bridge between what Ms. Hobbs just said, right? But I don't know if you can share the information, Dr. Felici.
Yeah, in general, it was well received, but I think it's also because at the British Council, we take a very human-centered approach to AI. So what Roberta was saying now was music to my ears, really, because that's the way that we should be using AI. Always, you know, bearing in mind that we're dealing with students, we're dealing with humans, and that we can use these tools to automate some of the processes, things that are more mechanical. But at the end of the day, we should be able to discern when it is wise to use them and when it's not. And I think that just, yeah, what Roberta mentioned is just the right approach. So yeah, in terms of the development of the test, I think that because we take this approach, we were always very careful about how we frame things, how we interacted with stakeholders, what kind of technology we used. That's why I emphasize the fact that we use explainable models. We never wanted to use, or we still don't want to use anything that is seen as a black box or a mystery. So yeah, this precisely resonates with the way that we work. So that's great.
Thank you. That's amazing. We know that there are other questions in the chat, but we're running out of time, so I'll pass it on to Tatiana.
Yes, thanks, Isadora. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, Dr. Mariano. Thanks, Roberta, for the great presentations you just delivered. I learned a lot with both of them. And I have a few announcements to make. But first, I just want to read a comment by my colleague and friend Liberato. I recently read a post on Instagram where someone wrote, I want AI to do the dishes and do the laundry so I can do the thinking and the artwork. I do not want AI to do the thinking and the artwork so that I am left with doing the dishes and the laundry. So I absolutely agree with that. Thanks, Liberato, for posting this. And just, I have a few things to share before we close. I would like to share only the slide with you in case you are interested in knowing more about our exams. Please get this QR code or visit this link. You can learn more. We will get in touch with you. And also, we are planning to send an email message to everybody that attended. If your email was recorded in our report, which I believe everyone's will be, you will be receiving this message very soon asking if you want an attendance certificate. So we will be able to provide that for you. And also, within a few days, we will be posting the video recording of this webinar on YouTube, and also we will let everyone know. So once again, on behalf of the BRAZ-TESOL Assessment SIG, the BRAZ-TESOL EdTech SIG, and the British Council, I would like to thank all of you for attending and for your engagement as well. This was a great session, and thanks for joining. See you next time.